This isn't imagination, and it isn't coincidence either. Sigma males trigger something primal in others, and most people never understand why. There is a specific kind of fear that doesn't come from aggression, dominance displays, loud voices, or intimidation tactics. It comes from unpredictability paired with control, and that is precisely where the Sigma male exists. Most people move through life broadcasting their intentions, explaining themselves, seeking reassurance and leaking emotions through tone, posture, and overreaction. This makes them readable and therefore safe. But you don't operate that way. As a Sigma male, your power doesn't come from asserting yourself. It comes from restraint, from silence, from the fact that people cannot tell what you're thinking or what you might do next. Psychologically, this creates discomfort because the human brain is wired to scan for patterns, and when it cannot predict someone, it fills in the gaps with threat. Not because you are dangerous, but because you are unmeasurable. You don't rush to speak, you don't explain your choices, and you don't react the way others expect you to. And over time, people begin to notice something deeply unsettling. You're not seeking approval, you're not competing, and you're not trying to be liked. That absence alone is enough to generate fear. Most people build their identity around external validation. They need feedback, mirrors, and emotional exchanges to feel grounded. But you do not. Your calm feels like judgment to insecure people. Your independence feels like rejection, and your silence feels like superiority, even when none is intended. And here is the part few will ever admit out loud. People fear Sigma males not because of what they do, but because of what they don't need. You don't need attention, approval, or permission, and when someone realizes they have no leverage over you, no emotional hook, no control, no influence, the nervous system reacts with unease. That unease turns into distance. Distance becomes caution, and caution quietly hardens into fear. Not loud fear, not dramatic fear, but a quiet, persistent fear, the kind people never confess, yet always feel. Point 1, emotional non-reactivity is interpreted as power. A Sigma male's emotional non-reactivity is often misunderstood, even by the Sigma himself. From the inside, it rarely feels like power. It feels like restraint. It feels like discernment. It feels like choosing, moment by moment, what deserves emotional energy and what does not. Yet from the outside, this absence of visible reaction sends a very specific psychological signal. Human beings are wired to rely on emotional feedback, to orient themselves in social environments. In everyday interactions, reactions function as confirmations that the social exchange is proceeding correctly. Laughter signals acceptance. Anger signals a crossed boundary. Agreement signals alignment. When these familiar signals are absent, the other person's nervous system does not relax. It searches. The mind begins scanning for meaning, for motive, for status. The Sigma male does not escalate, does not defend, and does not rush to explain himself. This creates a quiet asymmetry. One person becomes emotionally exposed while the Sigma remains internally regulated and observational. That imbalance is often interpreted as dominance, even when no dominance is intended. Social psychology consistently shows that the individual who reacts less is perceived as higher status, not because they are more valuable as a person, but because they appear less dependent on the outcome of the interaction. Dependency is readable at a subconscious level. Emotional independence is equally readable. Over time, people learn, often without realizing it, that attempts to provoke, test, or destabilize a Sigma male produce little emotional payoff. There is no spike of drama, no reassurance, and no visible leverage. This conditions a subtle caution. Words are chosen more carefully. Boundaries are tested less aggressively, not out of fear of conflict, but out of fear of inefficacy. When emotional hooks fail, influence fails, and when influence fails, insecurity quietly rises in the other person. The sigma male becomes associated with composure under pressure, not through performance or intimidation, but through repetition and consistency. He is the same in calm moments and tense ones. That predictability of self-control creates trust, distance, and authority at the same time. Quiet authority is not announced, it is inferred, and once inferred, it rarely needs reinforcement. Point 2. Silence forces others to project their own insecurities. Silence is one of the most misunderstood traits of the sigma male, often mistaken for judgment, aloofness, or hidden calculation, when in reality it is usually the natural outcome of internal clarity. When a man has spent time examining his values, boundaries, and priorities, he no longer feels compelled to explain himself to every room he enters. His thoughts have already been settled internally, so his words become fewer and more deliberate. There is less need to persuade, justify, or negotiate who he is. However, silence creates a vacuum, and the human mind has a deep discomfort with emptiness. When information is absent, people instinctively fill the gap with assumptions. They project motives, judgments, intentions, and entire narratives onto the quiet presence before them. Those who are confident and internally regulated often project neutrality, sensing no threat and feeling calm in the presence of silence. Those who are insecure, uncertain, or dependent on external feedback tend to project threat. This is why reactions to sigma males vary so dramatically. Some feel grounded around them, while others feel inexplicably unsettled. The difference does not originate in the sigma male himself, but in the psychological state of the observer. Silence removes the familiar signals people use to feel safe: verbal reassurance, emotional mirroring, and constant feedback. When those signals disappear, individuals who rely on them to regulate their self-image begin to feel exposed. Over time, the mind attempts to resolve this discomfort by constructing imagined evaluations. People assume the sigma male sees through them, notices their inconsistencies, or silently judges their flaws. In most cases, this assumption is inaccurate. The sigma male is often simply observing without attachment, registering information without emotional investment or the urge to react. Yet perception shapes behavior more powerfully than reality. Because people believe they are being evaluated, they begin to self-monitor. They adjust their speech, posture, and decisions around him, not because he demands conformity, but because their own mind demands resolution. His silence becomes a psychological mirror, reflecting back whatever uncertainty, confidence, or insecurity the observer carries within. For those comfortable with themselves, the reflection is neutral and even calming. For those who are not, the reflection can feel confrontational. This is why silence, though passive in nature, carries such psychological weight. It doesn't impose authority, yet it often produces it. Not through dominance or intimidation, but through the simple act of leaving people alone with their own thoughts. Point 3, independence disrupts unspoken social contracts. Most social environments operate on invisible agreements that few people ever consciously examine. Attention is exchanged for belonging, compliance is exchanged for approval, emotional availability is exchanged for inclusion. These arrangements are not written, but they are enforced through subtle rewards and punishments that shape behavior over time. People learn early that fitting in requires a steady performance, responding on cue, reacting appropriately, and aligning emotions with the group's expectations. The system functions smoothly as long as everyone continues to participate without questioning the terms. The Sigma male unintentionally disrupts this balance by existing outside of these unspoken contracts. He does not withdraw out of rebellion or superiority. He simply does not require constant reinforcement from others to feel anchored or validated. This absence of dependency creates a psychological disturbance in environments built on mutual emotional exchange. When someone does not play the expected role, others feel destabilized. They begin to question whether the rules still apply, and uncertainty spreads quietly beneath the surface. Independence is often framed as selfishness, but on a psychological level it is experienced as unpredictability. People fear unpredictability because it reduces their sense of control and predictability over social outcomes. The Sigma male cannot be guilted easily because guilt depends on shared emotional obligations. He cannot be rushed by urgency manufactured by others because his sense of time is internal rather than reactive. He cannot be anchored by obligation alone because obligation requires emotional leverage. This independence is threatening not because it is aggressive or confrontational, but because it exposes the fragility of the system itself. When one man opts out quietly without announcement or explanation, others are forced to confront how much of their own behavior is driven by fear of exclusion rather than genuine choice. This confrontation is uncomfortable, so it is often deflected. Resentment disguises itself as concern. Criticism disguises itself as advice. Distance disguises itself as indifference. The Sigma male becomes a silent mirror reflecting an inconvenient truth. Participation is often chosen, not mandatory, and reminders of choice unsettle those who feel trapped by roles they never consciously agreed to. His presence doesn't accuse anyone, yet it still provokes tension, not because he demands anything, but because he demonstrates that opting out is possible, and that realization quietly destabilizes everything built on compliance. Point 4, self-directed men cannot be easily controlled. Control rarely appears as force in modern social environments. It arrives quietly, wrapped in emotional leverage, expectations, unspoken rules, and invisible narratives about who someone should be and how they should behave. Most people are guided by these pressures without ever realizing it. A Sigma male, however, operates from internal direction rather than external approval. His choices are filtered through alignment, not validation. This does not make him rebellious or difficult. It makes him precise. He listens, observes, and decides independently, which immediately disrupts systems that depend on predictability and compliance. When praise fails to steer him, shame loses its grip, and consensus produces no urgency, people begin to feel something unfamiliar, the absence of influence. And where influence disappears, discomfort quickly follows. Many social interactions rely on subtle manipulation, not out of malice, but out of habit. The Sigma male unintentionally exposes this by refusing to play along. He does not react emotionally to pressure, nor does he explain himself excessively. He does not rush to reassure others that he belongs. This calm neutrality forces people to confront their intentions. Without the usual levers to pull, they are left with honesty, and honesty requires clarity, confidence, and accountability. Qualities many have not developed. That realization creates powerlessness. Powerlessness, when left unexamined, transforms into fear. Not fear of danger, but fear of exposure. The Sigma male sees systems clearly because he is not emotionally entangled in them. He notices patterns of behavior, repetition of tactics, and inconsistencies between words and actions. He senses manipulation without announcing it and steps back without drama. This quiet awareness creates distance. Distance weakens control. When influence fades, people interpret it as a threat to stability, even if no threat exists. Over time, they approach him cautiously, unsure how to position themselves, unsure which version of themselves will work. Compliments feel ineffective. Emotional appeals fall flat. Social pressure dissolves in silence. This uncertainty is unsettling because it removes the illusion of control. What they feel is not hatred or rivalry, but psychological self-protection. They monitor their words more carefully. They hesitate. They adjust. Not because the Sigma male demands it, but because his presence mirrors something uncomfortable. Self-direction. In that mirror, people see the limits of their influence, and limits to those accustomed to control feel like danger. Point 5, consistency without explanation creates authority. Authority is often misunderstood as loud leadership, dramatic gestures, or constant assertion of dominance. But true authority rarely announces itself. In reality, authority is born from predictability sustained over time. The Sigma male does not perform differently depending on the room he enters. His behavior remains steady, whether he is observed or ignored, praised or criticized. His values do not bend to accommodate approval, and his standards do not fluctuate to secure comfort. Because of this, he does not feel compelled to explain himself excessively. He is not withholding information out of secrecy, but out of self-containment. He does not seek agreement to validate his position, and he does not negotiate his identity to be understood. This creates something most environments lack: a stable reference point. Over time, others begin to recognize that his reactions are not dictated by mood, pressure, or reward. Where most people subtly adjust their tone, opinions, and boundaries to maintain social harmony, the Sigma remains internally aligned. This consistency is rare, and rarity is often misread as power. When someone does not shift under social gravity, they appear grounded. Groundedness signals self-trust, and self-trust is instinctively interpreted as strength. As this pattern repeats, people unconsciously stop testing boundaries because the outcome never changes. The response is always the same: calm, measured, and unmoved. There is no emotional volatility to exploit, no inconsistency to probe. This alone reduces chaos in his presence. Conversations become more deliberate. Interactions grow more cautious. Reduced chaos creates psychological space, and psychological space draws attention. That attention gradually transforms into authority, not because the Sigma claims it, but because others assign it without realizing they are doing so. This form of authority is organic and therefore deeply unsettling to those accustomed to hierarchy based on titles, volume, or force. It cannot be challenged directly because it is not declared. There is no statement to refute, no position to debate. Attempts to provoke it fail because there is nothing reactive to latch on to. Attempts to undermine it dissolve because there is no inconsistency to expose. What remains is presence, quiet, stable, and immovable. And presence, when sustained without effort, becomes the most intimidating form of authority there is. Point 6. You represent an unreachable standard of inner freedom. At the deepest level, the fear people feel around the Sigma male is existential rather than social. It is not rooted in competition, hierarchy, dominance, or the need to assert control. It is rooted in contrast. The Sigma male embodies a form of masculinity that does not ask for permission, does not wait for validation, and does not seek consensus before becoming who he is. He decides quietly and internally and lives according to that decision. This level of inner autonomy is deeply unsettling to those who have never experienced it for themselves. When people encounter a Sigma male, they are often confronted not with aggression, but with a mirror. That mirror reflects the invisible chains many carry every day. Judgment, fear of being misunderstood, fear of stepping outside expectations, and dependence on external approval to feel secure. The Sigma male exposes these chains simply by not wearing them. He does not announce his independence or attempt to prove it. He lives it, calmly and consistently, and living a truth that others secretly desire but cannot access creates a quiet, psychological discomfort. The mind searches for an explanation. Some label it as arrogance. Others call it emotional distance, unpredictability, or even distrust. But beneath these surface interpretations lies a more honest emotion, admiration mixed with insecurity. The Sigma male becomes a reminder that peace is not granted by society, status, or applause. It is an internal state cultivated through self-mastery and detachment from external validation. For those still dependent on the approval of others, this reminder feels threatening rather than inspiring. As a result, reactions differ. Some respond with respect, sensing strength without noise. Others respond with avoidance, unable to reconcile what they feel in his presence. Both responses are forms of acknowledgement. Understanding this dynamic is crucial for the Sigma male's psychological stability. He no longer internalizes confusion, distance, or mixed reactions as personal failure. He recognizes them as indicators of psychological distance rather than moral judgment. This awareness allows him to remain centered and emotionally regulated. He does not chase clarity from others, nor does he attempt to soften himself to be more acceptable. He stays grounded in quiet self-possession. In doing so, he preserves his inner freedom. He walks his path without explanation, without defense, and without the need to be understood by everyone. And it is precisely this calm refusal to perform that sustains his strength, his peace, and his independence over time. There is something quietly unusual about the Sigma male, something that most people sense long before they can explain it. When he walks into a room, he does not demand attention, yet people notice him. When he speaks, he rarely raises his voice, but his words tend to linger in the minds of others. And when he chooses silence, that silence is often louder than the noise around him. In a world that emphasizes visibility, constant social engagement, and predictable patterns of behavior, Sigma's presence unsettles people in a way they cannot quite articulate. He represents a different kind of masculinity, one that is less concerned with dominance and more aligned with self-possession, observation, and quiet, personal power. And while many admire this, some misunderstand it, others even fear it. The truth is simple. People judge what they cannot categorize, and the Sigma male by nature does not fit easily into categories. He does not try to lead, but he also cannot be led. He does not chase validation, but validation often finds him. He does not resist society, yet he remains deeply unaffected by it. This creates a subtle tension in the minds of normal people, those who operate within familiar social structures, relying on group validation, predictable interactions, and conventional measures of success. To them, the Sigma male is not just different, he is a disruption to the unspoken rules they unconsciously follow. They cannot place him, so they project onto him. They cannot read him, so they create assumptions. They cannot influence him, so they form their own interpretations of his independence. Some see him as mysterious. Others see him as intimidating. A few see him as aloof. And many quietly feel challenged by him without understanding why. But beneath those perceptions lies a deeper truth. The Sigma male is not intentionally provoking these reactions. He is simply living from a place of inner alignment, prioritizing authenticity, solitude, and clarity over external performance. The Sigma male moves through life with a calm internal compass, one that points not toward social approval but toward personal truth. He observes before he speaks, thinks before he acts, and disconnects before he reacts. His restraint is not weakness, it is mastery. And that mastery often exposes the noise, the insecurity, and the emotional reactivity that many rely on without realizing it. Today, we will explore 8 ways normal people tend to perceive Sigma males and why these perceptions arise. Not for the sake of judgment, but for understanding. Because once you see these patterns clearly, you begin to understand not only how the world sees you, but also why you walk your own quiet path with such deliberate calm. Let us begin. Point 1, they see him as mysterious even when he isn't trying to be. The Sigma male's mystery is not a performance, it is a byproduct of his inward focus. Most people reveal themselves quickly and repeatedly, wearing their emotions on their sleeves and narrating their thoughts aloud. The Sigma does the opposite. He thinks before speaking, and even then, reveals only what feels necessary. This moderation of expression forces others to sit with the unknown, and the unknown, by nature, invites speculation. People assume there must be something hidden behind the silence. They imagine complexity, depth, or secrecy. In reality, the Sigma is simply discerning. His silence is not strategic manipulation, it is psychological efficiency. Without realizing it, he forces others to confront their discomfort with ambiguity. Some admire his ability to say little, yet communicate much. Others find it unsettling because they cannot access him using the usual social keys: friendliness, small talk, emotional oversharing, or subtle probing. The Sigma responds only when something holds meaning, and meaning, to him, is rare. This creates a space around him that people label as mystery, even though he is simply not participating in unnecessary noise. The result is that normal people perceive him as enigmatic, unpredictable, or private, not because he hides, but because he refuses to dilute himself in the way society often expects. Point 2, they mistake his independence for arrogance. Many people interpret confidence through social comparison. Who leads, who follows, who seeks approval, and who gives it. The Sigma steps outside this system entirely. He does not seek praise, he does not compete for dominance, and he does not require a group identity for validation. To those who rely on these structures, his independence feels like a silent judgment. They assume he believes he is above them when in truth he is simply uninterested in being measured by standards he did not choose. His self-sufficiency can be uncomfortable for people who define themselves through collective reinforcement. When someone cannot be easily influenced, guilt-tripped, or persuaded, it challenges others to confront their own dependence on external validation. This is where the misinterpretation begins. His neutrality is mistaken for arrogance. His boundaries are misread as superiority. His quiet focus is interpreted as dismissal. But the Sigma is not rejecting others. He is simply choosing himself. And the world is not used to men who do that without explanation or apology. Point 3. They feel intimidated by his calmness. Emotional neutrality is misunderstood by many. Most people live in reaction mode, responding quickly, visibly, and often impulsively to whatever arises. The Sigma does the opposite. When confronted with tension, he becomes quieter. When challenged, he becomes more controlled. When provoked, he pauses instead of retaliating. This composure can feel intimidating to those who are accustomed to emotional back-and-forth interactions. A calm man forces others to face their own emotional volatility. His steadiness highlights their instability. His patience exposes their impulsiveness. His groundedness reveals their lack of center. And because few people are comfortable with this mirror, they project their discomfort onto him. They describe him as cold, emotionless, or detached. But his calm is not detachment, it is mastery. It is the quiet discipline of a man who does not surrender control of his inner world, regardless of what is happening externally. Those who cannot regulate themselves often perceive this as a form of silent dominance. Point 4. They think he is socially detached. The Sigma male is selective about where he invests his energy, not because he is afraid of rejection or uninterested in people, but because he understands the quiet cost of scattering himself too widely. He is not motivated by the need for constant companionship, validation, or noise. Instead, he prioritizes meaningful conversation, genuine connection, and environments where authenticity is allowed to breathe. To those who socialize out of habit, boredom, or insecurity, his selectiveness appears like avoidance. They assume he does not like people. They assume he prefers isolation. They assume he is uninterested in connection. But the truth is much simpler. He values quality over quantity. Shallow interactions do not nourish him, so he does not pursue them. Solitude is not his escape. It is his recharge, the space where he regains clarity, strength, and direction. People who are uncomfortable being alone struggle to understand this. To them, solitude feels like emptiness. But to the Sigma, solitude feels like alignment, a return to his center. Point 5, they see him as a threat to social hierarchies. Social groups operate through subtle hierarchies: leaders, followers, influencers, validators, and observers. Most people unconsciously adapt to these frameworks, adjusting their behavior, tone, posture, and even their opinions to fit into the group's emotional rhythm. They trade small pieces of autonomy in exchange for belonging, approval, and predictability. But the Sigma does not. He moves independently, guided not by group expectations, but by his own internal compass. He speaks when he chooses to, contributes only when it feels meaningful, and refuses to participate in the endless, unspoken competition for status that drives most social dynamics. His presence disrupts the social script in ways others cannot fully explain. Someone who is not trying to climb the hierarchy cannot be controlled through the usual psychological mechanisms. Not by praise, not by criticism, not by group pressure, not by status rewards, and not by fear of exclusion. The tools that maintain social cohesion simply fail to work on him. And because these tools fail, people often experience a subtle sense of unease in his presence. They cannot predict him, and unpredictability, especially in a social environment, is often interpreted as a threat. Humans rely on predictable behavior to feel safe. We read cues, follow norms, and expect certain responses. But when someone neither submits nor dominates, when he does not chase validation yet does not rebel for attention, when he simply stands apart without explanation, he breaks the unspoken rules that keep the group structure intact. This deviation forces others to confront the instability of the very system they rely on. Without meaning to, the Sigma destabilizes hierarchies simply by refusing to engage with them. His neutrality becomes a form of quiet power. His independence exposes the fragility of social ranking, and his refusal to play the game reveals a truth most people avoid. That status is only real if you believe in it. The Sigma's presence reminds the group subtly, silently, continuously, that freedom exists outside the hierarchy, and that alone is enough to unsettle those who have built their identity within it. Point 6. They believe he has hidden motives. Because the Sigma does not overshare, people fill in the blanks with their imagination. They assume silence must be calculated. They assume privacy must indicate strategy. They assume independence must hide an agenda. But the Sigma's motives are often simple: peace, clarity, focus, and freedom. He is predictable in his consistency, not in his communication. Those who rely on verbal reassurance struggle with this. They want explanations, confirmations, and disclosures, things the Sigma offers only sparingly. This leads to the perception that he is withholding something. In truth, he is simply uninterested in narrating his internal world. The less he explains himself, the more others speculate. And speculation often sounds like suspicion. Most people are conditioned to read constant expression as honesty and openness. They assume transparency is the default. When someone deviates from this, they label it as mysterious or even threatening. The Sigma's quiet nature challenges their sense of social security. They cannot place him into a familiar category, so they create one from assumptions. His silence becomes a canvas where they paint their own insecurities. His privacy becomes a mirror reflecting their lack of boundaries. His independence becomes a reminder of freedoms they have not yet claimed. And so they assign complex motives to a man who is simply practicing presence. The Sigma moves through life with a deliberate emotional economy. He refuses to waste energy explaining what does not need explanation or defending choices that stand firmly on their own. He understands that words are often misused as substitutes for identity, and he avoids this trap by living authentically rather than verbalizing endlessly. Because of this, he easily becomes the subject of speculation. People whisper, guess, and interpret his behavior through the filter of their own biases. They confuse his quiet confidence for hidden schemes, his stillness for calculation, and his peace for emotional distance. Yet the truth remains unchanged. The Sigma is not hiding anything. He is simply prioritizing what truly matters. His silence is not secrecy, it is self-possession. His privacy is not manipulation, it is mastery. And the world will always misinterpret what it does not understand. Point 7, they perceive his standards as harsh. The Sigma male has standards rooted in self-respect. He does not tolerate manipulation, disrespect, or emotional chaos. He does not engage with people who drain his energy. He does not entertain situations that compromise his values. To people who lack boundaries, this feels harsh. They interpret his standards as judgment. They assume he is being difficult or demanding. In reality, he is simply protecting his mental and emotional space. His standards are not about others. They are about him. He knows what aligns with his life and what does not, and he acts accordingly without guilt. And this is the silent truth most people miss. The Sigma male's boundaries are not weapons. They are forms of self-preservation. When he distances himself, it is not arrogance, but clarity. Clarity about what nurtures his growth and what quietly destroys it. While others seek validation through constant connection, he sees peace through discernment. He has learned often through painful experience that giving everyone access to his inner world leads to confusion, exhaustion, and emotional imbalance. So he guards his energy with intention. He listens deeply to his intuition. He steps away from noise long before it becomes chaos. And because he moves with such internal certainty, people who are accustomed to overstepping feel confronted by his refusal to bend. They mistake his emotional independence for coldness, when in truth it is a mature form of responsibility. He refuses to become entangled in emotional games. He knows that anyone who tries to guilt-trip him, manipulate him, or take advantage of his kindness does not deserve a place in his life. And so he walks away, quietly, without explanation, without drama. This confuses those who rely on attention, conflict, or emotional dependency to feel significant. They do not understand someone who simply disengages instead of arguing. But the Sigma male does not seek to be understood. He seeks to remain aligned. His standards function like an inner compass, guiding him toward relationships, environments, and commitments that support his highest potential. And once he recognizes that something is lowering his vibration, he releases it without hesitation. Not out of cruelty, but out of profound self-respect. Point 8. They view his lifestyle as unusual but intriguing. The Sigma male's life does not follow the traditional script. He prioritizes freedom over conformity, passion over image, and authenticity over acceptance. This creates an unconventional lifestyle, minimalist, purposeful, and deeply aligned with his values. Some people find this odd, others find it inspiring. Most find it difficult to categorize. His choices challenge the assumptions people have about success, happiness, and masculinity. They cannot decide whether he is eccentric or wise, distant or grounded, detached or enlightened. In truth, he is simply living a life that resonates with him, not one that impresses others. And in a world shaped by imitation, a man who chooses authenticity will always appear both unusual and magnetic. The Sigma operates according to an internal compass that many people cannot read. He measures his life not by external applause, but by internal alignment. While others rush to keep up with trends, he takes quiet steps toward a purpose he does not need to broadcast. His identity is not built on performance, and because of that, it remains steady even when the world around him shifts. This steadiness, this refusal to be swayed by noise or comparison, is often misunderstood as aloofness. But the truth is simpler. He saves his energy for what truly matters. His detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It is the deliberate choice to protect his mental and emotional space from the demands of a society that rewards overstimulation and punishes introspection. What others call mystery is merely his unwillingness to dilute himself. And what they call confidence is simply the peace that comes from not needing validation. The Sigma male walks a path that many admire, but few are willing to take. It requires solitude, honesty, and the courage to disappoint people who expect you to be predictable. Yet this very path is what gives him his quiet power. In a world full of noise, he remains the still point. In a world obsessed with attention, he becomes the one who does not chase it, yet effortlessly commands it. As we close this reflection, remember something simple yet quietly powerful. People's perceptions of you are often just reflections of their own inner world. The Sigma path is not about proving yourself, convincing anyone, or reshaping how others see you. It is about walking with clarity, choosing stillness over noise, and living from a place that does not require applause to feel whole. If these insights have helped you understand your journey a little more deeply, consider joining us again. Here we explore the inner landscape of men who choose intention over chaos, depth over distraction, and authenticity over performance. Take a moment now, breathe, and return to your day with a quieter sense of assurance. Thank you for watching. Stay steady, stay grounded, and stay true to your path. There is a quiet irony in the life of a Sigma male, an irony that follows him like a faint shadow. He spends his days minding his own business, walking his own path and asking for nothing from the world, and yet it is often the world that becomes disturbed by his presence. He is not loud, he is not demanding, and he does not strive for attention or validation. But the simple nature of who he is tends to provoke strong reactions in others, as if his silence says more than the words people constantly try to use to explain themselves. Most men are social glue. They bond, they blend, they compromise, and they adjust. Sigma males, however, live differently. They operate according to internal values rather than social expectations. They move quietly, speak selectively, and refuse to participate in unnecessary drama. They live outside the hierarchy, not out of rebellion, but out of clarity. Clarity about who they are, what matters, and what's worth their energy. But this clarity comes with a price. In a world where most people rely on approval, noise, group identity, and emotional exchange to feel secure, the Sigma male's independence can feel threatening. Even worse, some of his most natural behaviors he hardly thinks about, can be interpreted by others as rude, cold, arrogant, or even hostile. And here is the truth very few people ever say aloud. Sometimes it is not that the Sigma male is hated for what he does. It is that he is hated for what he does not do. He does not chase people. He does not react emotionally. He does not engage in meaningless conversation. He does not pretend to be impressed. He does not need anyone to validate him. To the average person, these traits can feel like judgment, even when no judgment is intended. They project their insecurities onto him, assuming he is dismissing or rejecting them. But occasionally, the Sigma male also develops certain habits, subtle ones that unintentionally push people away. Not because he is wrong, not because he is unkind, but because his internal world is so intense, so inwardly focused, and so self-sustaining that he forgets how uncomfortable his silence, his distance, or his detachment can make others feel. Today, we are going to explore these habits, not to shame them, not to change the Sigma male into something he is not, but to bring awareness, because awareness is the foundation of mastery. And even a powerful man benefits from understanding the effects he has on the world around him. Let's begin. Number 1, withdrawing without explanation. Sigma males often disappear into their own world when they need space. To them, this feels natural, but to others, it feels like abandonment, rejection, or emotional coldness. People take it personally, even when it has nothing to do with them. For the Sigma male, solitude is not an escape from people. It is a return to himself. It is the place where his thoughts settle, where his mind becomes sharper, and where he regains control over his internal energy. He does not retreat because he is upset, bored, or uninterested. He retreats because silence is where he recenters his soul. But the people around him do not see it this way. They see the sudden quiet, the lack of responses, and the emotional withdrawal, and they interpret it through their own insecurities. They assume they have done something wrong. They assume the Sigma male is pulling away because he no longer cares. They assume his distance is a reflection of their worth. What they fail to understand is that a Sigma's need for space is not a reaction. It is a rhythm. It is built into his nature. Just as some people recharge through connection, Sigma males recharge through separation. The world has conditioned most people to fear silence. They equate distance with danger and absence with loss. So when a Sigma disappears into himself, they panic, they cling, they overthink. Yet the Sigma male returns every time, calmer, clearer, and more grounded. His distancing is temporary, not permanent. It is maintenance, not abandonment. The challenge is that few people can understand a man who needs solitude as much as others need oxygen. And so the Sigma male's natural self-preservation often becomes misunderstood as emotional neglect, when in truth it is the very thing that allows him to remain present, stable, and authentic in the long run. Number 2, being too selective with conversation. A Sigma male does not waste words. He avoids small talk. He only speaks when necessary. While this is efficient and authentic, many mistake it for arrogance, boredom, or superiority. What they fail to understand is that his silence is not a weapon. It is a form of discipline. It is the quiet proof that he does not feel the need to fill the air simply to feel relevant. In a world addicted to noise, the man who speaks with intention will always stand out. And often, he will be misunderstood. He listens more than he talks, and this alone unsettles people. Most individuals depend on constant verbal reassurance, laughter to show friendliness, commentary to show involvement, and endless chatter to show belonging. The Sigma male operates on a different frequency. He communicates through presence, through observation, and through sharp, carefully chosen statements. This makes others uneasy because they cannot easily read him. They can't predict his next move. They feel exposed while he remains centered. His silence forces others to confront their own insecurities. They project assumptions onto him, assuming he thinks he's better or uninterested or detached. But the truth is simpler. He does not seek validation. He does not perform. He does not speak to impress. When he talks, it is because he has something meaningful to say. When he is quiet, it is because he is thinking, analyzing, absorbing, or simply choosing not to engage in pointless noise. Over time, people realize that this restraint is a strength, not a flaw. It protects his energy, keeps his mind clear, and ensures that his words carry weight when he finally decides to speak. In a world full of voices competing to be heard, the Sigma male's silence is its own kind of power, measured, intentional, and impossible to imitate. Number 3, displaying emotionless facial expressions. The Sigma's face often reflects deep thought rather than warmth. His neutral or unreadable expression makes others uneasy, leading to instant dislike or suspicion. This isn't because he intends to appear cold or intimidating. It's simply the natural byproduct of a mind that spends most of its time observing, analyzing, and quietly processing everything around him. While other men wear their emotions on their sleeves, the Sigma's inner world is vast and private, and his face becomes a calm mask that reveals very little. People who rely on expressive cues to feel safe or connected often misinterpret this silence as rejection. They assume he is judging them, looking down on them, or hiding something behind that controlled expression. In reality, the Sigma is usually lost in his own thoughts, studying patterns, noticing details, or reflecting on things that have nothing to do with the people around him. But because humans are wired to fear what they cannot read, his stillness becomes a threat. Individuals with insecure personalities especially feel unsettled by a man who gives them no emotional feedback. They cannot predict him. They cannot influence him. They cannot tell whether he approves, disapproves, or simply doesn't care. This ambiguity forces them into their own insecurities, making them project negative assumptions onto him. Even worse, society expects men to be expressive, social, and easy to interpret, and the Sigma's refusal to play that role breaks the unspoken social rules. People feel they cannot place him into a category, and what cannot be categorized is often treated with suspicion. Yet ironically,